So, William, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we walk into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
I'll do my best. I grew up in a little town, the capital of the Eastern Cape, Grahamstown. I was born there, went to school there, went to varsity there. Yeah, it's kind of, that's where it all started.
And I believe you did obviously science at Rhodes University, right?
Well, look, I had no option. Both my parents were science, both my parents professors, both my parents in the scientific field. I mean, I had no chance but to be abnormal. And yeah, I took science, physics, chemistry, maths, applied maths in my first year.
And can you tell us, William, what was your dream career when you grew up?
Well, you know, I don't think I really had a dream career. I was terribly narrow in my experience being academic the whole time. And I think that if you said me, what was I going to do? Look, I wanted to be a politician, and my father nearly had a fit. Then I wanted to be a radio announcer, and he had another fit. So that didn't work too well. I think, you know, when you get to varsity and you live there, you grow up there, it becomes a comfort zone. And one tends just to keep going in the comfort zone. So I wasn't at the early stages particularly worried about outside. So I can't really say I had a special dream.
And William, who inspired you in your early days?
Well, obviously I had two amazing parents. I mean, my father was considered one of the top 4 greatest brains in the country at that time. My mother was also a professor. So they were very dedicated people. Unbelievably, they worked together, as my wife and I did now in my career. And I was kind of left to myself. People who inspired me were, I think, my folks. They had did. I mean, he took 14 years to find the second coelacanth, and I was there at the time against all odds. British Museum, American said, "Oh, he's joking. It doesn't happen. It's this, it's that." He said, "I'm sorry. I'm going to find the second one." And 14 years later, he found it. And they all said, "Oh, okay." And I think that proved something to me and affected me in my career.
Now, William, following Rhodes, you obtained a master's degree from the University of Natal at the time in record time, in only 7 months. Can you maybe share, how did you do that?
Look, I am a fairly practical person. That's why physics appeals to me now, because it's a very practical subject. Also, it's chemistry, yeah. And I like the innovations. I mean, my teaching started at Rhodes. Second year, met a beautiful girl. She needed some education. She was a first year. I taught her chemistry, and within a couple of months, that group that she started had 120 kids in it. So the answer was, you know, wow, I love teaching. It obviously works, and it made me some money. So I said, well, this is interesting. So that's why right through my career at university, I taught first years, much, by the way, to the horror of most of the professors, because the kids were coming to me and not going to them. So I wasn't a particularly popular person, but, you know, so what?
And William, you started your career in the chemical industry at AECI. But you didn't last long there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that period of your career?
Well, a couple of dads. Oh, remember the dad was not an ichthyologist in the beginning. He was actually a chemist, and some of his chemistry students had gone obviously up the ladder, and they were in the area of AECI, and they said to me, "Come and join us." So it was a kind of friendly transfer. I went into the work study department, and I loved it. Here we were developing new things, trying to improve old things, and I had a flair for it. In fact, I developed one worldwide patent in the safety fuse department that I believe is still in operation today. They haven't improved it. And I love that kind of challenge of, don't tell me something can't be done, because then you've got me going. Don't tell me my neighbor has it, because then I won't buy it. If you understand. Yeah. I'm one of those guys. And so that indicated to me that, I'm and also I realized that, I'm not good with people. I don't work well in a team. My sporting, for example, my best sport was individual. I wasn't a team player. And I don't know why. I'm not a team player. I never have been. I found working in a big company, oh man, you were subject to all sorts of things you couldn't control. And, then I went to Afrox. And again, it was a big company, a big position. Yes, I was 29, and I was the technical manager, but I was in charge of training, such as it was. But man, I wanted to teach. I missed it. I missed the faces lighting up when they suddenly discovered something or learned something they hadn't learned before. And well, I guess what? I decided I'm not going to stay in the academic world because, I'd be under the shadow of my parents all my life. I didn't want that. I'm not going to stay in the industrial world because, well, I'm not a big company man. So come on, let's get out and see what I can do with teaching. And it was that I think was the huge step. Not quite knowing what was coming, but yeah, I said, come on, I'm young, let's get going. And that's how I branched out into education.
And then, William, you started Star Schools, and if I may say, you revolutionized education throughout the country. You taught almost 1 million pupils. You won the Teacher of the Year award. Can you tell us a little bit about why Star Schools and what made it so different and what made it so successful?
Okay. It was a fairly obvious thing. What had happened was that Raymond Ackerman, strangely enough, in Pick and Pay, had started the supermarkets. And I looked at the supermarkets and I thought, he is selling products cheaper, more of them, because he's got volume. Come on, isn't there a message here? And I thought, I am going to supermarket education. I want a lot of people who are very disadvantaged. Remember, those are the dark ages when dinosaurs roamed the world,
Yeah.
And a lot of people weren't getting decent education. And I thought, how can we bring good education to as many people as possible at the cheapest possible rate? And that was the sort of thinking behind it. I have to tell you, I came up against a lot of, if I use the word, political opposition to this, but so what? I like opposition. And I thought, okay, now what am I going to do? Now, the funny part is I went to the Star because they were already working with my parents. And I said, look, you chaps thrive on disasters. If something blows up, there's big news. Let's do something positive. They said, that's a good idea. So we started Star Schools, and they spread rapidly to all the other August newspapers right across the country. And then Bill took it up, and then the reporter got involved. And the Star, the idea was the Star would promote it, do that free, and take the name and get the kudos. Because remember, young people, if you subject them to newspapers early, they tend to become readers. So there was a win-win all over for this, and it did work. And so that's how Star Schools started. It started small, and it just grew like topsy. And I was one stage, we were bigger than UNISA. We had students coming out of our ears. We went into weekends, holidays, evenings, and it was quite a mission. But what you must understand here is that I had absolutely no teacher training. What had happened at Rhodes was, hey, I can teach. Wow. So I did it my way. Now, my way was, according to the experts, the wrong way. First of all, I had class sizes not of 25 or 30, but of 1,500 or 2,000. I didn't run for 45 minutes and then give the darlings a break. I ran all day. Okay, lunch and tea maybe. And the next day they'd come back for more. So I said, well, it's obviously working. Had I been trained in teaching, and by the way, I'm not saying don't get trained, but had I been trained, I'd have been trained that is not possible. And I probably wouldn't have done it. And anyway, so that was the thing. And we were able to bring in a few incredibly good teachers. We had a marvelous team and teach these kids. But what then happened was, We started weekends where we did a section for 8 hours. Saturday and then Sunday. Sunday was always bigger than Saturday because, I don't know, the kids seemed to enjoy it. Despite the fact it was all day and very big. There were thousands of kids who came. And then eventually we had a session at the Coliseum in Commissioner Street, Johannesburg. Now that theatre seats 2,000 people, and we had about 2,000 to 3,000 outside who couldn't get in. The Joburg Fire Department was having a heart attack. And we looked at this and we said, no, wait a minute, we've got to do something here. So what then happened was I looked at how can we spread what we're doing. We've got the townships, not with education. Can we go for this thing? And I thought, okay, what about radio? Well, the radio one, we'd had a little bit of experience with the SABC. I did that program, Let's Speak Afrikaans. And that's quite a story, very quickly. They came to me in desperation and said, the English service has made a promise at the party. They're going to run a program called Let's Speak Afrikaans for the English-speaking kids. We don't know what to do. Can you do it? So I, they always said I had a confidence born of ignorance. I said, yes, of course I can do it. Anyway, I've got two people who knew each other very well, and we started, I designed this program, and just before it was about to be aired, they listened to it. And the board of the SABC nearly had a fit. They came to me in horror, and they said, what are you doing? So I said, what do you mean? They said, you're making fun of our language. I said, no, I'm not. I'm having fun with it. There's a huge difference. Anyway, they printed 1,500 booklets because it had to have a print backup. You can't broadcast without print backup to make it work. And they printed 1,500 booklets, and I'm told that the number finally reached something like 70,000. It was one of the most popular programs on English service. So popular that BBC sent out a team to see how the hang we did it. And it was the evolution. It was very different. There were no scripts, no nothing. Anyway, so that gave me a bit of a clue. And then I looked at computers, because a radio wasn't going to work. I tell you that right now, not for things like maths and science. I want to see you teach maths on a radio. Come on, be fair. It isn't going to work. And I looked at computers, and I thought, okay. And then my wife and I, who's been by my side the whole time, by the way, made all this possible for me. We went across to Silicon Valley. We met Steve Jobs, barefoot and all. And after we were chatting, he said, what do you think of computers in education? I thought, well, Smith, this is where you get downed. I said, Steve, I'm afraid I don't believe in them. He almost jumped over the desk and kissed me. I was staggered. I thought he was going to stab me. He said, I'm sick and tired of people, I'm quoting him, trying to make these things do what they're not designed to do. I escaped. But in those days, they weren't. It didn't work. Now I looked at television. And I thought, okay, let's look. And TV was on the go. It wasn't something I'd thought of. But Nick, it was poor. It was boring. It was there, And I realized what the problem was. The problem was that these were being made in conventional studios in the time that the studios weren't being used. So what they were trying to do is force education out of a studio that honestly wasn't designed for it. So I thought, well, once again, my lack of training in television saved me, because had I been trained in television, I would have been told that what I was about to do was impossible. I sat down with a friend of mine, Rod Dixon, and we sat down in our factory, and I sat down. I said, right, give me a chair, sit down. I want you to build me the following. And we came up with what has now been known as the one-man studio. Now, let me think my logic. When I teach, I don't have producers, directors, cameramen, script writers, I'm alone. Now, why must I have the difference with television? If I write a script for an education program, who am I writing it for? Not for me, but for everybody else to know which camera, which microphone, which light. Whoa, hang on a minute. So we designed a studio which looked nothing like a TV studio. If you'd walked through it, you wouldn't know what it was. But it was a one-man studio. The teacher controlled it, as you do a class. Now, immediately, what did that do? It cut the cost by at least 95%. You had no other staff. Number two, you could come in anytime and have a go. Number three, you weren't frightened of making a mistake because you were alone. You could wipe it out and start again. So you experimented much more freely than if you had staff all around you. And it was spontaneous, and it worked pretty well. So we were able to say to the SABC, listen, we've got a program here that we can give you, because I went to First of all, Barlow ran that Charles Lip, and he loved the idea. Then I went to Liberty and Hilton Applebaum. He loved the idea. They sponsored it. And of course, my big hero, Agri Cluster, which we'll talk about him later, editor of the Sowetan. And they all said, yes, yes, yes. And I said, look, I want to go live. And they said, what? And the SABC said, what? You want to go live? What do you mean? I said, well, when I was in a class and a kid puts up a hand, I get an audio question. I didn't see his book ever. Classes are too big. And it works. So why can't the audio come over the telephone? Oh, all right. So the SABC said, well, listen, this has never been done before, which I confirmed. You're going to have to get cabinet approval because, well, you can understand. So Professor Fillion and I went down to Cape Town and we met cabinet, and at the end of a long table with all these very senior people sitting down both sides. I think I had Stoffel van der Merwe with me at the time as well. And I'll never forget, at the other end, there was a guy, I think he must have been a little crocodile. But anyway, I gave my point, and he said, well, Smith, where's this been done before? And I said, it hasn't. And if I can ask, so what? Nor has a heart transplant been done before. No, put him back in it. Well, then he said, why do you think you can do it? So I said, well, why do you think I can't? And he couldn't answer me. So the attitude was, well, oh, for heaven's sake, let this Smith guy go and do it. And when he messes up, then he won't come and worry us again. And by the way, interesting enough, I took this thing also to Anglo-American, to Michael O'Dowd, who said as well, it's not going to work. He said, if you're still around in 6 months' time, I'll eat my hat. Well, I often wanted to take him to salt and pepper. But anyway, we won't go there. And these are the negatives one gets. And we did our first broadcast. I must admit, I was terrified. But at the end of it, one of the SABC people phoned me up and they said, you know, Smith, that when you went live, we kissed you goodbye. I'm quoting him. And he said, were we wrong? He said, man, you've started something that's going to be amazing. Now, for the people who are listening to me today, they're probably saying, what is all this about? I mean, you know, what's he getting at? What's the problem? Yeah, but remember, 40 years ago, it was a problem. It was still in the dark ages. Nothing could happen. Now, it's all that. People, of course, they phone in, they have messages on the internet and what have you, but then there wasn't. And it suddenly took off. And, well, yeah, and, you know, and then from there, this whole live thing, I mean, we had Mandela phone in, and there's a lovely story about Mandela, which I'll tell you quickly. When they wanted him to phone in, Zelda, his secretary, phoned me up and said, listen, the old man wants to talk to you. I said, that's fine, and I do know him a bit. But there's one condition. You're not going to believe what this is, Nick. So I said, what? He said, don't ask him any questions. I love that one. I still chuckle about it because I wouldn't ask him any questions. Shame, man. But he came in and I had all sorts of ministers and education people. And what was also nice about the phone-ins was that people phoning in from industry. I had a call from AECI, and from the ammonia plant. The guy and the engineer said, I'm watching you. And by the way, can I add something to what you've just said, which is happening here in the factory now? And that was fantastic because the kids realized this is not studying from pages in a book. It's real. It's happening out there. And the other thing that was very interesting was that, as I said, you don't just broadcast education. It doesn't work. You need backup, print. And that's where Agri-Cluster and Star and them came in. And every single broadcast had a backup, so you could have it in writing. And there was a shop in Soweto that actually made a living out of buying the Sowetan, photocopying the backups, and selling them afterwards. There was enough demand for that. So yeah, it was absolutely incredible. The broadcasts were difficult, but then the final one, if you want the ultimate end of the tip of the whole thing, the end of it was, I was approached by Quentin Green and the Americans to go into Africa and do a broadcast into Africa. Of course, I said, yes, why not? I didn't think. Anyway, they linked up right, and we were into 28 countries. satellite in, on, down onto the ground stations. I would not allow anyone to charge for them. It had to be free in every case. That's why I went to SABC. And then from the ground stations, they broadcasted out to 28 countries terrestrially. Well, it was something else. First of all, and if you want, if you want problems, here they are. Number one, it was satellite phones, so there was a delay. Now you know the delay when they interview reporters out in the field, but if it's a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, hey, it's difficult. Number two, I was dealing with 4 or 5 different languages. My languages are not good. My wife's the linguist. I'm not. Number 3, we were dealing with different syllabi all at the same time. But it worked. And you're not going to believe this, but our viewership grew and grew and grew. We hit 100 million viewers, and then we topped at 120 million viewers a day. That's got to be the biggest classroom in the world. It was half of Africa. And I look back on this and I still go cold, because that's a lot of people. But that was amazing.
Now, William, is it fair to say you are first and foremost an innovator? And in a way, you were leading your industry into a new era, right?
Look, I suppose if you want to, I'm fairly quiet about this. I did what I enjoyed doing. I did what I felt should be done. I did what I could do. Beyond that, yes, I suppose so. I'm an innovator. That was one part of it, which, by the way, made this whole thing possible. If we had not invented the one-man studio, you would not be talking to me today. That studio became a miracle, because once we decided to go live, we had to change 2 plugs, and the whole thing went live. There was no difference. And the phone-ins were marvelous, and it just worked absolutely beautifully. So yes, I am an innovator, but I think my biggest passion was seeing those faces light up when they understood something for the first time. That was just wow.
Now, William, so many of our listeners are future leaders, and they're all looking for their next big idea. So can you maybe share, talking about leadership, what does the future of leadership mean to you? Maybe in teaching, but also in general. What does it mean to you?
Look, I think leaders are terribly important. The trouble is the right leaders. The people must lead who are sincerely leaders and don't have ulterior motives. That's the part that frightens me. And a better leader means a better world for my family, for you, for my country, and for fellow man. With no one to show us the way, there's only chaos. And if leaders go chaotic, as some of them I'm afraid do, oh dear, it becomes absolutely chaos. There's no end to the chaos. So leadership is very, very important. I'm a little skeptical of democratic leaders, because they, in a catch-22 situation, very often, they need to do what is right for what they've been elected to do, which is the country. But the people who elect them don't agree that they're doing the right thing. So now they've got a problem. What do? Do they do what is right and lose power? Or do they do what is wrong and lose the country? I'm very grateful I'm not in that position, because it's a terrible decision. You're dealing with people who have weird ideas, some of them in majorities. It's not going to work, but if you don't, you're out. And if you do, well, the country goes to pieces. So leadership is terribly tricky. And, I'm not trying to decry it, but I could never do it. It would destroy me.
Now, William, you have, throughout your career, you have touched millions of lives, and so many people credit their advancements, their career, their leadership to what they learned from you. So when it comes to building future leaders, what is your advice? What have you learned from your own journey that is really important for building future leaders?
Well, first of all, I think a leader is a special kind of person, as a teacher is. And not everybody's born a teacher, not everybody's born a leader. It does need a special kind of person, the kind of person who's got a thick skin on the one side and a thin skin on the other. The kind of person who knows what's right and wrong. A kind of person who can take the knocks, because they're going to be knocks. Believe me, Anglo-American to me was a big knock, you know. And you can't be right all the time. You've got to accept that. And you've got to, you know, and I think one of the biggest problems, and I mean this very sincerely, is a leader needs to be honest, and he also needs to be humble. And power corrupts. There is no doubt about it. Look at some of the cases worldwide at the moment. What got into these people? They had everything. And what do? Something damn stupid. Why? Power. They thought they were above the law. And that is crazy. And one has got to watch this. One's got to watch the whole business. That we don't handle power very, very well. You've got to be secure in yourself, and you've got to be secure with your family. I mean, families take a knock. Believe me, they take a knock. My family has a lot of complaints about the fact that I wasn't always there for them. In fact, you can't be. It's a very lonely life. Don't forget that it is. Being a true leader is lonely. I've been lucky with a wife that's sits by me all this time, so I haven't been lonely. I've had someone to fight me and bounce things off and put me straight. And yes, thank you very much. But it is a lonely life. And you need to be big in that. You've got to be confident. You've got to be able to admit your mistakes. And this is something people often brush over. I watch our own politicians doing this. No, man, we all make mistakes. Come on. Let's stop being stupid. We don't know everything. And things change. Believe me, they change. A decision you made yesterday can be perfect for yesterday, and today, oh boy, it's wrong. Okay, it happens, but it's better than not making a decision at all. So the answer is be prepared for that. And this thing about power, I can't impress on you enough. Power breeds arrogance. It breeds corruption. It breeds greed, and it's just one of the human failings. It's not something that they've all got it. We've all got it, and you've got to fight it. It must not happen. You must be able to sleep at night and be comfortable in your own skin, and that I think is terribly, terribly important.
Now, William, you mentioned knocks. When life knocks you down, it knocked you and everybody else down. What is your advice for future leaders? How should they handle challenges? And what are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
Look, I think there are a couple. First of all, change. What you're comfortable with and being taught today does not mean that tomorrow it's going to be right. And you've got to keep abreast of change. And I think this is difficult because change is uncertain. Change, you feel uncomfortable. You don't quite know. I mean, look at the virus. Look what it's done. Look how it's changed all of us. Would you have thought that 18 months ago or 2 years ago? You know, I mean, so you've got to keep an eye on change. You've got to watch things, as I said, like corruption. You've got to be careful that people don't like you because what you can do for them rather than you. Rather don't have friends. It sounds horrible, but because so often you're not sure why they're your friends. It's all sorts of things. This misuse of power, I just think, is very sad, and also jealousy. Be careful, people. Oh yeah, and you've got to be able to handle criticism. Boy, oh boy, don't I know it. You've got to be able to handle people being negative. And one of the things about it, remember that someone who's negative towards you teaches you more about you than the person who's positive towards you. You learn more from your enemies. Listen to them, analyze what they say, but don't necessarily follow them. But there are times when your enemies come up with things and you say, wow, I didn't think of that. Okay, that's a thought. Thank you. And modify if necessary. But don't be put off course if you get criticism and it's absolute rubbish. No, come on, you're going to get it, And I often say that the more successful a leader in some ways, not always, the more enemies he's got. Not, this isn't, I know it didn't happen in the case of Madiba, but you know, I mean, it's you know, you get a lot of that because they're doing the right thing rather than pandering to the masses.
And William, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the new skills, or maybe all the old skills, that you would recommend future leaders should learn?
Well, I think the first one is, and I know this may sound crazy, but no man is a god. Remember that. No man is a god. And no man is above the law. So you've got to believe in yourself, okay? You've got to speak well. Now, this is a very important part, I believe, of leadership. I mean, I'm not particularly good looking. I'm full of wrinkles, you know, but I'm lucky to have a voice, I'm told, works with the microphones. So the answer is speak well. Now, by speaking well, be careful what I mean by that. Simple language. Don't use words in general that people don't understand because you're trying to impress them with language. Forget it, because if you're talking and one word isn't understood by a listener, you've lost them. They don't know what you're talking about. Keep it simple. So from that point of view, be humble, because you're also human. You also have mistakes. You also got foibles. Yeah, be humble. You're not a god. I keep on coming back to that. And you must be prepared, as I said, to listen. I know it sounds funny, but you can learn something from the person who brings you your tea in the morning if you're prepared to listen. But believe in yourself. You have to. Believe in yourself and move forward. And don't worry if you get people yapping at your heels. Analyze them and move forward.
Thank you. Now, William, I mean, you've touched millions of lives, so many people, and we've just seen it again on LinkedIn, credit their success to your mentorship and your teaching. Can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
This is difficult. You must remember that we never had a full-time school. So I was never able to follow a person through several years of development. I met them in standard 9 sometimes, matric sometimes, pre-university sometimes, and maybe at first year sometimes, and that was it. Then off they went. But I know that we've sent you a cutting from Professor Tembisa, and I wonder if you could show that, because that gives you an idea of somebody who, you know, has benefited from what we do.
Well, hard work and determination motivated a domestic worker to complete her PhD and become Dean of the Faculty of Informatics and Design at the Cape Town University of Technology. Professor Tembisa Ngondi always loved maths, and she was inspired by none other than maths and science TV teacher William Smith to become a mathematician. Aisha Ismail brings us her story.
Growing up in a small village and wanting to be a mathematician seemed impossible. For most, just going to university was a pipe dream. But Tembisa Ngondi was not going to let her circumstances stop her from realizing her dream.
In our time then, when we were doing our matric, we did not have a standing maths teacher. Fortunately, the school then had a TV that had integrated with the video recorder. And what we did then, we will watch William Smith as our period, but we will record him. And then we'll go back to our sessions again that are recorded and practice our mathematics. And I tell you, I was excited when he was honored by Rhodes. I said this is long overdue because he has been doing a great job for all of us.
And so her journey began. Her mother owned a spaza shop in their Paddy village and her father was a handyman.
My dad was actually a very brilliant person. My mom never go to school, but she could read and write. They were my heroes.
Her older sister worked as a domestic worker in Port Elizabeth at the time to help support the family.
I'll go and work as a maid just to get things for myself and also support some of my siblings. And then 1990, because I couldn't get school, I couldn't continue with my studies. And then I went to be a maid full-time.
She then completed her first degree in IT and soon became a junior lecturer.
When I got my first degree, I think it was a breakthrough for the whole family. I decided to present a celebration party in my village, just to also bring in other people, the young girls in the village, to come and see that this is actually possible.
Fast forward to 2014, when she was awarded her PhD from the University of Fort Hare.
Then I would say to the young people out there, they mustn't look on what they are, on what they have now. They must look to the future and see what they want to be and function in that level, at that level.
This, the professor says, has worked for her. Aisha Ismail, Cape Town.
I want to say one thing about what you've just watched. The Professor Tembisa did the work. You can't, she's very kind to say it's me. I can offer you the water, but you've got to drink it. You've got to run with it. You've got to work on it. And when I got the award from Mr. Ramaphosa, there were thousands of people who came back and said, I'm on my own, I'm on my career, I'm down the path of something. Thank you. You helped me, and that's what counts. But they did it. I didn't. I simply offered. They must take it, they must use it, and they must make it happen for them. And in this particular lady that you watched there, I'm delighted because she took what I'd made, took it and made it happen. So yes, good show.
So you mentioned a number of role models of leadership like Mandela, Steve Jobs. Who else comes to mind? Any other role models that you would recommend future leaders should study?
Look, they're all, you know, it's difficult, but one of them is definitely Dr. Agri-Kloster. He had lots of problems, you know, and he got into that Sowetan drive, and I tell you, he was a star. He passed away some time ago, unfortunately. We all do, of course. So he was great. You know, he had vision. He was tough as nails. He wouldn't let any rubbish happen, and I was so impressed with Agri. We worked together a lot. His what did he call it? Nation building.
Yeah.
I joined him in the beginning of nation building, and he was a marvel. He did things that he thought was right, even if his colleagues in the other newspapers in the Argus company didn't think was right. He said, I'm sorry, I'm the editor, I think it's right. And off he went. And by the way, he was right. So from Agri's point of view, absolutely fabulous. But you know, it's very difficult to bring up names. But I'm sure if you asked for them, they'd come back, because we had thousands on Cyril Ramaphosa's award. I was flabbergasted, you know. But yeah, there are plenty of them.
Now, William, I know you're retired. You obviously value your privacy. I don't think you are really on social media. You're not really active. But is there any way that our listeners can follow you somewhere and maybe, if need be, get in touch?
No, I'm too old.
Okay.
You know, you know, it's difficult to retire when you've been in such a high energy situation. But I've retired. I'm enjoying my traveling overseas. I'm enjoying the family. I'm enjoying having my wife that I can now see and not discuss business over. But without her, I tell you something, I wouldn't be here. So I mean that it's been a wonderful partnership, and she deserves half the doctorate. How's that?
Right. Beautiful. Now, last but not least, William, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own lives?
Yes, not one, but I'd just like to say, be humble, be honest, be confident, and always give the little man a way out. Don't crush him. If he's wrong, give him a way out. That's, I think, very difficult sometimes to do, but I think that is part of being a great leader.
Well, William, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom. into the future of leadership and reminding us that we should embrace criticism. And you're sharing your leadership journey. It's so inspiring. So thank you so much, and all the best.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. And yeah, thank you.